Hungary has always been a square peg in an EU round hole. Senior figures are now talking openly of leaving the bloc, writes Jonathan Saxty. The time has come to consider the realistic possibility of Hungary and Poland, as well as other conservative states in Central and Eastern Europe, actually leaving the European Union. The latest to hint at this was former Hungarian Central Bank Governor, András Simmer, who warned his country had drifted closer to potentially leaving the bloc. Hungary and Poland have done well out of the single market, but they never needed to join the EU to enjoy the benefits they get. Instead they, and others in their region, could have joined the European Free Trade Association. EFTA, as it is commonly known, comprises Iceland, Liechtenstein, Norway and Switzerland. Between 1960 and 1972 the UK was also a member. Why was EFTA not on the table in 2016? Largely because EFTA states must still adhere to the four freedoms of goods, capital, services, and people, the latter being the big sticking point for Brexiteers. But this would be less of an issue for the likes of Hungary and Poland, for the time being at least. Many Hungarians and Poles have moved westward since joining the EU, often sending money back home, while much of the outflow has either slowed or, in some cases, reversed. Hungary and Poland have an issue with EU asylum plans, and non-European migration, but for the time being they are not generally opposed to freedom of movement within the bloc so long as migration flows to them remain at acceptable levels. This could put EFTA on the table as an option for these national conservative states. If the likes of Hungary and Poland joined EFTA, it would require them to decide to leave the EU, possibly through referenda, and b. for the EFTA states to agree to their admission. With EFTA, countries like Hungary and Poland would still get the benefits of the single market and Schengen area but would not be part of the EU customs union, which imposes a common external tariff on goods entering the union. With EFTA, states like Hungary and Poland could also enter into bilateral third-country trade arrangements. Like Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Norway, Hungary and Poland could remain in the single market via the European Economic Area, EEA, or they could negotiate bilateral agreements as Switzerland has. As EFTA states, the likes of Hungary and Poland would also not participate in the Common Agricultural Policy or the Common Fisheries Policy. One argument against EFTA is that EFTA states have to introduce EU rules without having been part of the discussion. In reality, however, there are mechanisms for influencing, while the extent and scope of said rules is far less than EU states must agree to, while Switzerland only aligns when it wants to. For both sides of the current EU divide, a liberal Western Europe, and a conservative Central and Eastern Europe, this seems to offer a solution to their problems. States like Hungary and Poland could retain the economic benefits of the EU but ditch many of the political ties. Okay, freedom of movement would remain, and there may come a point when the likes of Hungary and Poland even reject that. But, for the time being, EFTA could provide an off-ramp. EFTA would not totally extricate Hungary and Poland from the EU, but it would create a semi-detached relationship, and, given that states like the Czech Republic, Hungary, and Poland have retained their own currencies, leaving the EU to join EFTA could be even more viable. Hungary and Poland would have more sovereignty over everything from borders to energy. There would be no more arguing about rule of law disputes and access to EU cash. Indeed, EU states in Central and Eastern Europe are increasingly set to become net contributors to the EU by the 2030s, meaning the argument that Hungary and Poland need to stay in the EU for financial survival will no longer hold. EFTA would be the trade bloc Hungary and Poland thought they were joining in the first place, which is evidenced by the far slimmer machinery needed to administer EFTA, much of which Switzerland does not participate in anyway. True, EFTA states may not agree to the conservative states of Central and Eastern Europe joining. True, EFTA may not go far enough for Budapest and Warsaw. That said, EFTA may offer a stepping stone or a blueprint for a second EFTA-style group to emerge in the EU's conservative East End. Ultimately, what EFTA demonstrates is that Hungary and Poland do not need to be in the EU to get the benefits of EU membership they desire. Central and Eastern EU states are no longer as financially dependent on Brussels as they were. In the end, EFTA could offer the off-ramp for both sides of the EU's cultural Iron Curtain.